Hello and welcome to the Drummergy Podcast, the show about life, music, and most importantly, drums. Yay! Oh, I have to get a little sip of coffee. Give me a second here. Give me 1 second. Yes. So if you're ever watching this on the replay, I get up around 6 o'clock on Tuesday mornings to go live at 7. And I don't generally speak to anybody or make any noise because everybody in the house is still asleep. And then I come out here and start talking like some wired up radio personality. And it takes a moment to get the old voice to work. But it's going good so far. It's going good so far. Welcome to episode 115 of the show. It's pretty cool. It's this show is growing legs more and more, and it's exciting and it's fun. And I appreciate everybody that checks in to hang out. Today's topic is going to be Fix It in the Mix, and we're going to be talking about the recording studio, the recording process, and those kind of things. But most importantly is relying on the technology to make up for our lack of ability. And I think that's the wrong direction, personally. So I feel like I'm eating this microphone. Let's back this up just a little bit. As normal, we will start with the goofy holidays of the day. There's not that much going on as far as that goes, but I just want you all to know that today is National Chocolate Covered Nut Day. So you should have some of those. It's also National Quiet Day. And when I looked at that, I was like, what does that mean? They're just talking about being really quiet and silent all day, which that's kind of hard to do when you're running a drum studio. It's going to be loud in here pretty much all day long. And then going against National Chocolate Covered Day is Let's All Eat Right Day. What? Those two holidays are coexisting on the same day, and I'm not sure how that works exactly. John Klein is here. Good morning, my friend. I get to see you here in a couple hours. That's going to be cool. Love it. What else is going on? Last week we had on drummer Tanner Abney, and that was a great hang, and got a lot of positive feedback from that show specifically. Good stuff, man. I'm going to keep going in that direction, having guests on and being live and being able to talk and answer questions. I like that component of this podcast. I have been spending time watching other podcasts on YouTube and just to kind of see how some others flow. Of course, I've watched podcasts and interviews over years, but now that I'm more involved with that, I'm looking at ways that to try to improve those. I just want it to be this really cool, special thing. And I think I'm on the right track, according to some of the feedback I get. And interestingly enough, I get messages sent to me either through Facebook or YouTube. Sometimes people aren't so nice. And others are really encouraging. And then others say thank you. And one gentleman had emailed me and said, I like that you said, you just quietly delete those trolls. And I'm like, yeah, man, whenever we put content out here for the whole world to see, you're always going to run into that risk of people coming along and making fun of what you do or criticizing what you do. And I see drummers, well-known drummers, that people just attack for what reason, I don't know. And then just out of curiosity, sometimes I try to look and see if they have videos out on YouTube or what their social media presence is. And more often than not, they've got nothing going on. Nothing. They'll criticize well, for example, I saw a thing on TikTok Yeah. Hey, my buddy Christian Housel is here. Good morning, Christian. He said, "Great show, Fred. Don't worry about the internet, tough guys." Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And by the way, for those tuning in, today's topic was spawned by a discussion I was having with Chris Housel the other night. So I'll tie that in here in a moment. But I was watching a guy on TikTok and he was playing, let's see, I think it was when the levee breaks from Led Zeppelin. And if you are familiar with that song, there's this huge reverb in that recording. And supposedly when they recorded John Bonham playing that, he was like in a big house or a castle or something like that. And just the natural reverb of the room, he was like in a giant staircase. And I think they had the microphones positioned up high in that staircase, which gave the drums that effect. Well, then you have all the internet experts that come along and try to criticize anybody else recreating those drum parts and that sound. And this was of a really great drummer, in my opinion, playing in a parking garage that had this huge reverb in it. And it sounded so cool. But then you got people commenting like, well, technically great, but you'll never have the feel of John Bonham. Well, no, because John Bonham, that was him. That was his DNA. That was his feel. Same with Jeff Porcaro. I've got somebody working on the shuffle for Rosanna, which it's a difficult drum groove to play technically and then have that great feel. And when you see other people trying to recreate that on the internet, people come along and they're like, man, you'll never be Jeff Porcaro. Well, guess what, guy? That person was never claiming to be Jeff Porcaro, but he was putting himself out there and saying, hey, check this out, which I think that's cool. But, those people criticizing it, if you go and look, they've got nothing happening. Greg, good morning, man. I don't think I've seen you at the top of the show in a while. I think I see you tuning in near the end. It is early for us here in the Treasure Valley in Boise, Idaho. Yeah. So anyway, you can choose to delete those people, just, delete their comment if you want, but something inside of us too, at the same time, there's like this internal struggle is like, well, I want to debate this person now. No, why? just don't. I too have to sometimes restrain. But yeah, I have my fair share of critics. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so what else is happening? I talked about last week we had Tanner Abney on. Next week I'm going to have my good buddy, my bestest friend in the whole world, my singer for the band Midline, Anthony Fagiano, will be here, and that'll be a great time. He and I have so much history together, playing music and touring, and shared a lot of the same experiences, and so that's going to be a great discussion. Chip Ritter's here. Yo, buddy. I'm just about to talk about the Deck Show. I love, everybody that's tuning in, I love promoting and talking about things that I like. I think I mentioned that several times. I am a big fan of the Drummers Education Connection podcast, and over the last few years became really good friends with those guys, and I really admire them. I think they're great, and they have amazing discussions on Tuesday as well, live interactive streaming. So Drummers Education Connection on Facebook, all one word. You can catch their show as well as on YouTube. And that happens, at 11 a.m. Pacific time. My good buddy James Harrison is here, and I can always count on James to weigh in with great stuff. I'm going to highlight James's comment. James said, I saw an interview with the engineer, and he said that Page had found an echo machine that was used on that track. It was recorded in a stairwell in a house mansion. Yeah, we're talking about when the levee breaks from Led Zeppelin. Yeah, that's James. Those stories are so interesting, and I always try to imagine myself like being in that situation or in that place at that time, and wondering what was the thought process, because did they know at that moment that, well, maybe they didn't know, but just the impact that would have on the community, the music community, especially drummers. I don't know if they realized what was happening in that moment or if it was realized later, but either way, it's pretty impressive stuff. And while I got James's attention, James Harrison, you see James here in the comments. If you go follow James on Facebook or Instagram, he's been doing these short videos. He calls them hot topics, meaning there could be some disagreement in what he's talking about. And yesterday he did a video, I think it was yesterday, about should you clean your cymbals and which I feel like I'm really essy. Which cymbals you should clean or not clean. And of course, a lot of people have opinions about how that may or may not affect the sound and if you should or shouldn't. I agree with James that, brilliant cymbals should probably be cleaned, and then the raw cymbals or not polished cymbals probably should just be left to age as they would. I clean all my cymbals regardless of what kind they are, and I'm not using any special cleaner on them other than just mild dish detergent and a soft sponge. And I clean all of my cymbals at least once a month, if not more often. I like my stuff to be really shiny and clean, and I think maybe part of that is that I'm on video frequently, and I don't like to have a dusty cymbal or anything like that. So yeah, even on my Peisty Rude cymbals that I have, which are not a polished cymbal, I still will clean those with some mild detergent and some hot water. And because of the frequency in which I clean my cymbals, I'm never really scrubbing very hard. It takes just minutes. It's like washing dishes, basically, to me. It just takes a few minutes. Wash them, rinse them, dry them, put them back on the kit. And so that's my take. But my point being, follow James. He's got lots of great tips and tricks and really great talking points on everything drums. And love it. Chris McCall is here. Let's put Chris's comment up. This is a fun little feature. I'm having fun with this. Chris says, great show last week. Fred really enjoyed the Tanner Abney video. However, even though he denies it, I think he's actually Buckets the drummer. Buckets the drummer, I believe, is the, if you guys see the videos of the guy who's drumming on buckets inside a bathtub wearing a horse head mask thing. He thinks Tanner is that guy. I don't think that Tanner is that guy. James, you're welcome, man. I think I just man, just being immersed in music and drums is really cool, and I love watching my friends do the same, which brings me back to the Drummer's Education connection, because as you guys know, when I'm talking, I can just shiny. I can hop around subjects like crazy and be a little disjointed. Drummer's Education Connection today is going to have on Joe Bergamini, and he is a drummer from New Jersey, I think. He's drummed with a lot of different people, and he does production stuff. And I think he was also the drummer for Debbie Gibson at some point. So that should be cool to hear that guy's stories. I've been posting less and talking less about my leg, and I think just because I'm just getting better. I'm almost 7 months into recovery of this leg injury. I'm moving around better. I tell people I walk like a penguin because I look like a penguin when I walk. And I'm typically dressed in black clothes. Yeah, it's depending on the time of day and how tired I am, I could walk smoother or I'll walk more with a limp. But I do notice that, some days will pass and all of a sudden realize that things are easier. So the leg is getting better. The reality is it probably won't be until about a full 12 months that I'm really back at it. Doesn't seem to really affect me drumming wise, although when I'm practicing with midline, that's a more demanding drumming part. And my leg does get tired and starts to swell as I'm playing. And so then my faster bass drum stuff I play gets a little more difficult. It's not as well defined. I noticed that the rest of the guys in the band don't seem to really hear a difference, but I definitely feel the difference and hear it in my in-ears. But that's and with that too, when I'm practicing those songs, I practice how I'm going to perform them. So I'm pretty animated and just trying to get all of those things back so that when we do start playing out, I'm not like, oh, how do I move? So Midline is looking for some show opportunities that make sense for us. And we've got a couple inquiries sent out to see if we can get on board with some shows. James says, Joe Bergamini writes some great transcriptions and books. Oh, I did not know. So I'm going to be definitely tuning in. Steve Tyson, Midline show coming. The only thing that we have, Steve, coming up that I'm not sure is 100% booked yet is July 25th at Heritage with, I think, 3 other bands, one of which, interestingly enough, is Karen Comes Killing. So former guitarist for Midline, Scott Elliott's metal band. So that's all that's on at the moment. I do have some emails sent out to maybe get on some national shows, either at the Knitting Factory or the Revolution, and see if we can get some shows under our belt this year. Yeah, breaking your leg will delay these things, but we're ready to go. Cliff Miller, we have a show coming up with the Young Dubliners at the Knitting Factory on March 7th. I don't know if this is our 4th or 5th time. I want to say the 5th time. 4th for me, but 5 under the Cliff Miller band, I believe. So that will be fun to see those guys again and play headlining or a national show. And it's really looking forward to that. Chris says, yes, dying to see Midline live. I don't think that you've seen a live Midline show, have you, Chris? I don't believe that you have. Yeah, you got to come. So let's get, let's see, I'm jumping around a little bit. Oh, so I mentioned James Harrison having all these really cool videos. Watching James and all his snare drum videos that James, I think, has 8,000 snare drums. Not that many, but a lot. I've had 3 snare drums on my shelf that have needed attention for quite some time. And so James kind of inspired me to fix those. One is a Pearl Morgan Rose signature snare that actually James helped me pick that snare drum out years ago. We were happened to be together at Guitar Center. And actually, James and I may have been judging the Guitar Center drum off competition. I think he and I both did that for a couple of years in a row. So we were in the drum room and I was looking for a new snare drum and tapping around, and that Morgan Rose Pearl signature snare drum was there. So I bought it. Sounded great, but the snare wires, 2 of them broke. And once those start breaking, the tension on those gets a little funky and wasn't sounding right anymore. So I replaced that. That snare drum's back up and running great. I have a Tama 8x14 birch snare drum that's ridiculously thick. It's like 20 ply birch wood, and the hoop broke, or it got damaged and bent. So it'd been sitting there for a long time. So I ordered a brand new die cast hoop that was the black nickel black nickel chrome, I guess is what it's called. Put that on, put a new head on it. Sounds great. So that's back up and working. Then I also have a 5x14 Tama brass snare that one of the lug casings where the tension rod goes through has been stripped out for a long, long time. And even though it's been stripped out, I continue to use it, even though that one lug I couldn't tighten. So I ordered brand new tube lugs to put on it. Took my drum all apart, got ready to put the new lugs on, and guess what? They were the wrong size. And the wind just kind of went out of my sail on that. So I got to figure out something. I sent those back to Amazon yesterday. Man, sometimes it's hard to find parts for these older drums. Blue Flashes says, "Good morning, Mr. Coffee." Good morning to you. And that's a good segue to have a sip. Yeah, so getting my drums back happening is good thing. So that one snare drum, though, I got to figure out what my plan of attack is going to be. But yeah, I just want all my equipment to work, ready to go. And plus, because I'm recording frequently, I like to have a choice of snare drums to work with. You know, this, because we're going to talk about recording here in a moment. And I think that, you know, when you're a drummer and you're recording, that snare drum has so much to do with the overall sound of the song and the mix. It's having that appropriate snare drum sound in there. Landon's here. Good morning, sir. Good to see you. Okay, so going back to Mr. Chris Housel. Chris has been playing. Blue Flashes says DW nickel over brass is an awesome snare. Hey, do you have that snare drum? I'm curious. I would love to have that snare. I missed out on some good opportunities on a DW nickel over brass snare drum a handful of times, either on Facebook Marketplace or at Guitar Center, where they had just a ridiculous sale of like $150 or something. And I stalled and I never bought it. And now it's like impossible to find something at that price point. But I'm always scouring. If I bought every good deal out there, I probably wouldn't have a house. I'd be homeless. I'd be homeless. That's how you find those good deals. It's because some drummer wasn't responsible and had to sell all his stuff. Which reminds me that the producer sent me this. James has asked, is the stripped lug a tube lug? Couldn't you just replace the swivel nut inside? Yeah. So James, I did look at, I don't know how to take it apart for one, but it looks to me like, and I could send you a picture maybe sometime later today. It looks like the threads are right into the lug casing. I don't think that it has a separate part inside of it. So if that's the case, I'm going to see if I could just retap it and have it fixed. That would save me a lot of money because it was almost $100 when I ordered those tube lugs. And I've looked at eBay trying to find replacement lug casings and tube lugs for that drum, and just can't find them, along with the throw. I think I'm gonna have to buy a new throw and probably have to drill new holes in the shell to put the throw on there, which makes me nervous. I really don't want to devalue the drum if I don't have to. So yeah, I'll send you a pic later, and maybe we'll talk on the phone. I haven't talked to you in a while. That would be cool. The producer sent me this kind of funny little meme. It says, if you are ever feeling down on yourself, think of all the nice things Steve Irwin would say about you if you were a little lizard and he found you sunning yourself on a rock. And I thought that was great. I can't do an Australian accent, but it was like Steve Irwin would be like, oh, here we have on this little rock, this poor little drummer I sound like, yeah, see, I can't do an Australian accent. Poor little guy. Thomas Schuster, happy Tuesday to you. How are you feeling, man? Are you getting back into can you move? I know that you got a long haul ahead of you in your recovery too. I think you tore your like pec muscle or something crazy like that. That's just nuts. I hope you're doing great. Okay, I got to get on to today's subject, or I will never get there. So, okay. Was it Saturday night? The producer and I went out, and we went to the Heritage Social Club because two bands were playing, and friends with everybody in both the bands. The Moneymakers, which is a Black Crowes tribute band, and then Priest, which is a Judas Priest tribute band. You know, I think at first hearing that, you'd think, wow, those are two pretty extreme opposite ends of the spectrum there, from Black Crowes to Judas Priest. But actually it was really, really great. And before the show, I was hanging out talking with Chris Housel, and he was talking with another guy that he introduced me to, who I believe his name is Lance, guitar player. And Chris was telling Lance that we had a recording studio, and just kind of like introducing us and telling him what we did and what we were about and those kind of things. So Chris and I started talking about the recording studio, and we started talking about being prepared to go in the recording studio and how many takes does it take to get a song tracked. And I have a pretty good reputation of tracking songs fast. I like to learn the material inside and out, and I like to be prepared and so comfortable enough that when the red light comes on recording, that's not like messing with my psyche in any way. And I just record the song, and off we go. So a lot of times I'll get a song tracked in one take. If I'm having a bad day, maybe 3 or 4. If it starts going past that, it's like, oh, what is my problem? So then I feel like I'm wasting time. But then that conversation led into punching in. Then we started talking about fixing mistakes, and you know, these tools that we have available in the recording world to solve a lot of these problems. You can solve timing issues. You can solve tuning issues on instruments to a great degree anymore, and you can fix bad vocal performances through Melodyne or Auto-Tune or whatever. We use Melodyne here. So the producer's here. She said, I'm going to put her comment up because it's funny. So she's talking about if I'm starting to go over my goal of tracking in 3 takes or less. She says, if you are having a bad day, the producer will let you know. Oh yes, she does. She does. I could sit right in this room and I could look right through the glass to the production, to the control room, and she'll peek around the monitor, and you'll get a look. I'll get a look. Because we're married, we can really tell each other how we feel. So no, she's awesome though. She keeps it real. She's keeping it real. So anyway, when we were talking to Chris Housel at Heritage and we were discussing studio and all of these tools that are available to us, I said something along the lines of, those are great to enhance a performance, but you don't want they're not meant to become the performance. And he looked at me and goes, I like that. You should talk about that on Tuesday. So here we are. Oh, Chris is weighing in. Chris Housel says authenticity is our greatest instrument as artists and musicians. Critics come and go, but your voice, passion, and purpose as an artist is yours alone. This is why I do my best to reduce punches and avoid all the tricks available in the studio. Authenticity isn't perfection. And that is 100% true. Thank you for that. Yeah, exactly. So I have a couple bullet points here that I'm going to go over. I've personally recorded in, I think, all the studios in Boise or the surrounding area at one point or another. I've recorded in a handful of really big studios and some really small studios in the Los Angeles area. I've been to some pretty cool studios in Austin, Texas, not recorded there, but I've been in them. And then Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been in a lot of studios there, again, not recording, but just visiting and checking them out. It would seem that no matter what studio you're in or how big it is, the process of recording and the goals of recording and the expectations of recording are pretty much one and the same. It's to get in there, get to work, hopefully working in an environment that's conducive to being inspiring and calming. I'm a big believer in the environment you're in. Is it comfortable? And like teaching drum lessons, for example, here in my studio, the couch isn't over there and there's no TV on and everything's related to music and the paint color and the vibe of the place. I think that's really important. And it's same for recording studio. If you're recording in a cold, harsh environment, a sterile environment, that's not really inspiring. So, but like I said, the goal is one and the same. The process is one and the same. It's get in there, get to work, and also be comfortable that you can play your best and being prepared. And there's a lot of different reasons why people would record and the purpose of recording. So why record in the first place? So for some people, it's just like just for their own personal thing to have like a memento or a keepsake of a period of their music journey. And they just want to record something, maybe it's somebody just playing acoustic guitar and singing, and they're not worried about putting this out there for the world to hear or to see. And if they sing off pitch or they don't strum cleanly or whatever, they're not concerned about that. They just want to record this for their own personal purposes and to have that. And that is all fine. Totally fine. And I think because that's what their goal is, then the critical or technical things really aren't even involved, just because of the nature of what it is and what it's for. The other would be, I wrote like to preserve a moment in their time. Yeah. The other reason to record is maybe you want to share that with some friends or whatever and put that out. And so now you're exposing yourself a little bit when you go to record. And so maybe you want it to sound better. And then the third reason is that, you're going to be putting that out there and also in kind of a competitive market to where the production value has to compete with high production values out of other big studios. And by the way, there are more and more and more songs and records. I know I say records, but like a collection of songs, okay, in a body of work. Not necessarily talking about the physical album, but so many of those are being done in a space that's the same as what I have or even smaller. You'd be surprised where some of the pros are recording and that's just the way everything has moved. Equipment's become easy to get, easy to learn. pretty affordable to have. And there's a lot of videos you can watch on YouTube on how to record, and then you just get started and you start figuring out what works and what doesn't. But I don't want to talk about the producer end of it so much as the artist side of it. James Harrison said, back in the day, I recorded an album in the famous Ardent Studios in Memphis, Tennessee. It was a trip compared to many of the smaller type studios. This was as pre-Pro Tools. Yeah, that's awesome. So if you're going to record and be on the competitive market, there's kind of a demand from the audience for it to sound a certain way, for it to be tight. The timing is great, and there's feel. So going into the studio, preparedness, how well do you know the song inside and out? Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I like to know the song inside and out, not just my part, but if I'm recording with other people, I have a pretty good idea of what the vocals are supposed to do and when, and bass, guitar, keys, whatever the instrumentation is. I've got a really great idea what those parts are supposed to be too. And then, when you don't hear those, you're like, that's not how that goes. And that's, if we do a collaboration recording or even writing original material, it's knowing what all those things are. Cliff Miller is excellent when it comes to that. He knows those songs inside and out. He wrote them, and then whatever we're contributing to the song, he knows those really, really well too. And then on top of being not just a guitar player, but the singer as well, knowing what notes are going to work together and what he's going to be able to sing with or against those notes. It's pretty impressive. I learn a lot myself just watching how he listens to things. It makes me listen in a different way too. So I guess what I'm probably getting at slowly is how well can you play the drums for your song? Because I'm not the only one that drums here. I've had other people come and drum for a couple other bands. 2 bands that I've had here recently recording drums is a band called Fear the Fall, and then another band called Town of Trees. And both the drummers from that band have come over here to record. And just like any other recording studio, that we have a fee, we have a rate that they're paying. And so I think there's a little bit of pressure that comes from knowing that you're paying by the hour to get something done. And because of that, you want to be prepared. They send the tracks and the producer gets them into the session and ready to go. And then they come in and play. And sometimes they have to work out different parts and away they go. But there is a little bit of pressure. And I think it's a good pressure to have to be under the gun a little bit and make that happen. That just reminds me, there was a quote. I'm going to see if it's appropriate here. This is the part that people enjoy, is when the producer starts messaging me. She said, "Stop repeating yourself. Don't." I'm not sure. I'm not sure what all I've repeated. I've probably repeated everything. All right, I was talking about the drummers for Fear the Fall and Town of Trees both recording here and being really prepared. It's great. It's great. They come in and they get 2 or 3 songs recorded, and maybe they spend 45 minutes to an hour on each song, which is pretty good. Pretty good to come in and record and do that. Mary and I talk about people and their preparedness coming here all the time because it helps us to navigate how our studio is running when we have all these different scenarios appear and how we're going to navigate around those. Mary is so great and patient with people recording. She's just so calm, and I think her calming nature is calming for the artist who's trying to record, regardless if they're singing or playing guitar or drumming, whatever instrument they're playing. She's just she's got a really gentle way of pulling performances out of people too, which is great. And so the better that we as musicians play and perform when we're recording, the easier that job is going to be for the person who's recording and mixing that. So start with the drums. Great sounding drums. Like, are your drums tuned really well? That makes a big difference. And the better your drums sound, the less work the engineer has to do. The easier it is to mic, the easier it is to mix or do some kind of little bit of EQ work here and there. It makes it really easy. Makes it really easy. And then playing in time. I was talking to a buddy last night, and he's been going to Nashville pretty frequently over the last year and recording in studios there with big name producers, and that whole world that he is in demands perfection, so to speak. Well, maybe I should be careful in how I use the word perfection. They don't have a lot of patience for you figuring out what you have to do. They want you prepared and knowing exactly what you're going to do and get in there and get it done. And he made this joke. I said, well, what do you think the expectations are? Is it like 100% expectation? And he said, it's the 50-50 rule. You're going to get smacked in 50 feet or 50 seconds or something along those lines. Let's see. Greg says capture it at the source. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is really capturing great sounds at the source. Brandon Fields is here. I'm vowing to only release music recorded on a 4-track cassette recorder from here on out. Well, I think that's how they did it when they first started recording. They had really limited space to. I know that Brandon's just joking, but to Brandon's point is, when you recorded back and you're recording on tape, you were limited on how many tracks that you could have. And more often than not, people were recording together at the same time, and you were all capturing your performances at once. And so everybody had to be on their toes. It's way different now than when a guitar player can sit there and really just comp a part. And comping is like a compilation. So you recorded this track with this guitar and again and again and again, and then you're picking all the really great parts and knitting together one really great performance that was comprised of many takes. Yeah, James has an excellent point here. James says, in most major studios, if you're not prepared, they will find someone who is. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then Brandon says, not much room for mistakes on tape. And that is true, too. I remember when I was in high school, I think it was a senior, maybe I was just out of high school, somewhere in that time frame. The little band I had, we went and recorded 4 or 5 songs. And we were all in this mindset of, we're going to go record an album tonight. We're going to go in with nothing. We're going to come out with the final product. Man, that engineer mixing guy must have been overly patient with us, because I think I got home at like 8:00 in the morning. We'd been there all night, and this guy, I'm sure, was spent. He was wiped out. But we had those 5 finished mixes, and we thought we were going to be super famous rock stars off of that overnight recording. Chip Ritter is here. He says, let's see what Chip says. Chip says, man, you are an inspiration to me, bro, to have gone through what you went through and maintain such a positive outlook. Great stuff, man. You can't buy that shit at Walmart. Dude, thanks. I appreciate that. I've mentioned, Mary said, stop repeating myself, but I do have to repeat this, should the tools available to us be there to make up for our lack of ability? And I don't think so. Punching in, if you know what punching in is when you're recording and you have a little spot where you trip up or something like that, and you want to go back and re-record just that little spot where you had that little trip. Really hard to do with drums. If I'm recording if I use my whole kit on a recording, the whole kit plus overheads and room mics, I think we have 15 microphones going. So if you have to punch in, it's really, really difficult unless there's a hard, clean area to punch in and out of. So, 99.9% of the time, it's really, really important to get a full drum performance from beginning to end, just how you want it. It's really, really important to do. Can you play the song for 3.5 to 5 minutes and not trip on your shoelaces? That's the goal. Other instruments are a little easier to punch in and out. But if you have to do it repeatedly over and over and over and over and over, you might as well just re-record the entire thing. And that's where I think some people get in their headspace of like, oh, the record button's on and now I can't play very well. And some of this has to do too with how experienced you are in the recording studio. How often have you done it? If it's your first time doing it, I think sometimes people inflict this pressure upon themselves to, oh, I'm going to play perfect. This is forever. And then they get in their own way mentally. James says countless stories about bands where members were replaced for recordings only. Yeah, that gets into the whole like ghost writing or ghost performances where certain drummers are getting credited for being on a recording when, somebody else clearly had recorded that instead. Yeah, and then James also said punching in is like an eraser or liquid paper. This is great stuff, guys. James said, I had to record once with no cymbal crashes, then add the crashes later so they punch in if necessary. Man, I've heard so many stories about that too, James. I can't imagine like playing a drum part and not hitting any cymbals and then going back and playing that drum part again and then play the cymbals. Really interesting thing. Chip says the guy from Toto was brought into play on Beat It by Michael Jackson. Human Nature by Michael Jackson. I keep forgetting every time you're not near. Yeah. Yeah. I think they had several different drummers play on Michael Jackson's stuff. J.R. Robinson, I think, is one. Is that right? Chip, you probably know. James, you probably know. Brandon says red light syndrome. Yeah. Yeah. And I experienced that too when I first got started recording is you see the red light come on and now it's like, oh, what's happening? What am I going to do? I think I could be pretty critical of vocalists. I don't mean to be necessarily. I've mentioned so many times over the last couple of years, like I like lyrics. I've gotten really into what somebody's singing about and the emotion of what they're singing about and how that influences how I'm going to drum to help steer the emotion of the song through what I'm playing. And and making really great choices as far as composing a drum part, and that that's going to match. So I listen to singing and lyrics a lot. But you can have somebody come in and sing, and they can squeak and squawk their way through something, and then through the magic of recording, you can fix all of these inconsistencies in singing with pitch correction and things like that. But when it's taken so far to the extreme, then the listener actually hears the correction happening, because you can hear the little digitized effect. And so that's like a big thing, is like, okay, now the pitch correction became the performance, and somebody just hacked their way through a vocal line. Interestingly enough, this is where like AI can what are my opinions on AI? I'm not a big fan, but I've been recording for somebody, and he sang relatively close to a vocal phrasing and melody that he wanted, and he can take that and put it into an AI generated thing, and you can pick what kind of style of vocalist that you want, and AI will take that vocal performance and make it pretty convincing, which is great to vibe off of, to record. But then that whole vocal thing is going to be totally replaced by another guy who lives in Massachusetts or New York or something. I can't remember exactly, but phenomenal vocalist. When all this stuff actually comes out, then I can say, oh, this is what I did. But until then, yeah. Chip says, yep, J.R. Robinson. Brandon says, singing in the studio is the most unnatural thing for me, and I hate most of my vocal tracks. Yeah, you know what, Brandon? I've heard some of your stuff. I think even I am not a singer at all. I have no gift in that department. What? I wish that I did. Because I enjoy singing. In fact, Mary and I were getting some tracks ready for a vocalist to come in, and she said, go in there, and because we wanted to get some reverb and delay happening, and so we, as being the recording studio, want to be prepared for when the artist shows up, that we're not like experimenting with how to do stuff. But at any rate, so I was in here and I was trying to just sing something into the mic, and just to get like a sound check, so to speak. And then she recorded it, and oh my gosh, it was terrible. It was so bad. But while I was sitting here, I was thinking, oh, maybe it's not so bad. It was really, really bad. But to my point is, like, sometimes we just hate the sound of our own voice, but to everybody else in the world, we just sound like we sound. So I think that's probably pretty normal, Brandon, is to be like, I don't really like the sound of my voice. But anything I've heard from you, I thought, oh, that's Brandon. Chip says, I recorded for a metal band once without cymbals and then added them. It was a horrible situation. They were serious about it. The whole thing sucked. Yeah. In fact, Chip, I think I heard one of the deck shows not long ago that you mentioned that, and I was thinking then, I was like, man, I don't, how do you groove off of that? I don't think that you could. James says, I think Chip is referring to Steve Lukather, guitarist from Toto, on those tracks. Eddie Van Halen played the solo only on Beat It. Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe you're both right. I don't know. I have no reason to think otherwise. So just being really prepared going into the studio so that you can perform your best for that recording. And that's another thing, going back to like the internet trolls. I did a cover of the name just escaped me, from The Police, Driven to Tears. I did a drum cover of Driven to Tears by The Police. And a lot of people liked it. And I spent a lot of time learning that song the best I could. I am not, good grief, my mind. The drummer for The Police, Stuart Copeland. Wow. I was going to have to berate myself later. I am not Stuart Copeland. But any video that I ever saw of Stuart Copeland playing Driven to Tears, from one video to the next, none of those drum parts were relatively close to the same as what he recorded on that. Every performance he did was different. And I think that's how it works with some people, is just like, well, we happen to capture how I played that song that one time in the recording studio, and every other time I play it, it's different. But you get the internet experts that have a certain angle to their nose, and they want to tell you what's what. So I just ignore those guys. I had a lot of fun learning that and playing that song. Greg says a lot of Nirvana's Nevermind was recorded minus cymbal crashes, and the crashes were added in a second pass. Whoa, I had no idea. That just seems so bizarre. If the producer's still watching, it might be an interesting experiment to try to record something I'm super familiar with and then go back and add the crashes. I would just think, like, even just lining up, like, because more often than not, you always hit a bass drum with your cymbal crash, right? So you got a cymbal and a bass drum happening at the same time. I'm like, man, that's such a physically connected moment. The accuracy in making that lineup again would just be, I don't know. Chip, I don't know how you or James survived that. You probably just wanted to kick rocks or kick rocks at somebody when that. Chip says, yo, I got a bail. Great show today. Thanks. Hit up. He put in my website. Hit up fredrockfisher.com. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So, I just really am a big believer being prepared, going in the recording studio. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make the recording engineer or the mix engineer's life so much better. Like Greg said, get it right at the source. Having great drum sounds, having great bass, having your guitar dialed in and ready to go. And then if you're a vocalist, having your stuff together to sing, and to sing really well. And that's why part of, Mary and I doing some like pre-recording sound check was so that when we have a singer come in, that they can feel really comfortable, have a little reverb or delay in their ears, so that makes them feel more comfortable rather than just a super dry sound. And we want people to elevate their performances coming in here, and we want to elevate the studio for them as well. And those two things got to go hand in hand. So James says there's an audio only live recording of Levy where Bonham is obviously playing the echo part very much more pronounced. Yeah, I agree, James. I too have seen those where and there's video out there too where you can see him playing that part that had the major delay or reverb on that. And so I just kind of have to laugh when I see people criticizing other drummers copying that. It's so bizarre. But guys, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Next week, Anthony Fagiano will be here, my singer from Midline. That'll be a great hang. And I got to line up some more guests. I love having guests here and hanging with you fine folks. It's always good. And I will get my I will be getting my review of today's show. I'm sure here shortly, which is totally fine. Totally fine. I want to be better at what I do. Just like being in the recording studio. I want to be good at doing the podcast thing. So thanks, Blue Flashes. Thanks for hanging out. And James, I will try to get a picture of that drum part and send it to you. And I think it just needs to be retapped. And away I go. Hopefully that is the simple solution, since parts are hard to find. Reminder, go check out the Drummers Education Show today at 11 a.m. Pacific time, and check back in with next week. All right. And appreciate you guys. Have an awesome day and week ahead. All right. We'll talk to you later if I hit this button correctly.